So first off, I just want to do a few thank yous, and then we'll get going. But first, a big thank you to Exhibit A Brewing for letting us infiltrate their tap room and make this our home for tonight, and we appreciate that. Also want to thank Jeff for putting in some effort in terms of getting the venue, and Connor for doing some graphic arts and just spending some time. Jonathan for placing the order for the dominoes tonight. So it takes a village. This is a group thing, a community thing, and I appreciate everybody jumping in and doing their part to make these events happen. And we hope to continue to do this like on a quarterly basis where we have a guest speaker. Of course, every month we want to get together and socialize and have our normal get-togethers and chats. But I also want to send a big thank you out to our food and beverage sponsor tonight, and that's Foundation Devices. And we have the CEO here with us tonight, Zach Herbert. And I understand it's a remote company, so everybody's dispersed all over the world probably. But Zach lives in Woburn. Yeah, so he's local. And in my mind, that means we have a Boston-based Bitcoin hardware wallet manufacturer right in our backyard. So before I introduce our guest speaker tonight, I just want to have Zach come up and say a couple words and just flash his new device because I think it's pretty cool. I don't have first-hand experience using it yet because I just ordered mine last week, so it's somewhere en route hopefully, and I look forward to playing around with it. But here's Zach.
Thanks so much, and I'm not used to speaking with a microphone. It's been a long time, But I was saying I'd rather spend our money on this kind of stuff than Facebook ads or Instagram or something. So thanks so much for having me. We make Passport, which is a Bitcoin-only hardware wallet. Also, we make a mobile app called Envoy, which only works with Passport right now, but over the next several months, it'll actually be a standalone mobile wallet as well. So hopefully you'll all check it out at some point. We manufacture in the New England area, in New Hampshire actually, not too far away. So I really am proud that we make everything in the USA. And all our stuff is open source down to the hardware level, software level, and so on. So we try to, carry on the ethos of the space. And we're fully remote, but we just bought a place in Woburn 2 months ago. So I'll be around here for a long time, and we'll try to get to these meetups. And we also typically sponsor the BitDevs meetup in Boston now that we brought back recently. So highly encourage you all to check that out too. But thanks so much.
Thanks for being here. Awesome. Not your keys, not your coin. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges. Get your passport. I'm not going to sit down again because I'll get too comfortable. So let me just, I don't even have a big intro here, but I do want to thank Larry for making the connection. Larry, you made the connection to Benjamin. You probably don't even remember, but you texted me and said, hey, you should check out this guy, I don't know. And so through a couple DMs and a good conversation over the phone, Benjamin and I connected, and I just knew right away it was like perfect for us to have him come down and like tell his story. He's just about to launch his book, which came out a week ago. Yep. Maybe a week ago. Just under a week ago. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Almost like a book launch, at the Boston Bitcoin Meetup. And he was graciously, wanted to come down and speak to us and talk about his experience with the Canadian Trucker Convoy. And I look for, again, I haven't read the book yet. I ordered it. Here's my copy right here. I got it on Amazon, and I look forward to reading every word. But I actually look forward to you telling us tonight sort of the abbreviated story, the abridged version, if you will, maybe the Cliff Note version, which I used a lot in college. So anyways, without further ado, here's Benjamin, and enjoy. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, don't let the beer behind. Hong Kong HODL. You should. We have this commission going on in Canada right now, which is like a Senate hearing. And you should have heard the government lawyers trying to repeat the term Hong Kong HODL over and over again, not having a clue what it meant. It was absolutely hysterical. So I want to thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be able to do an event without it being canceled. And I'm not even joking. We had 2 book launch events scheduled in Toronto. And in the end of 2022, I was connecting with Jordan Peterson on trying to do an event with one of my podcasters, which is what I do in addition to trucking. And he was very frustrated that he was unable to actually host an event in his home city. And I just went through it as well. I don't know if it's because Jordan did the endorsement on the book, but somehow word got around before we even publicized it that we were going to do an event. And what happened was there was political pressure put on the venue, which is a venue very similar to this, the first one. And then they started getting threats of vandalism if they hosted myself, and we were trying to get Jordan there as well. Then we went through a second event, same sort of thing. So it's a pleasure to be here in the land of the free. Do not ever give that up. God, your country is so amazing for so many reasons. And I got to tell you, what we just went through in this story, that respect that you guys have for your Constitution here, we now really get it. And it's really important. So hold on to that with your life. It's very important. So a little bit about me. I've had many different careers. And during COVID, I have a brother who's a police officer who's retiring, and he said, why don't we buy trucks? And I said, what, are you crazy? Where did that come from? And he said, no, I always wanted to have a truck and whatever. He said, let's buy trucks. Maybe we'll do a trucking business when I retire or whatever. COVID hit. Canada was like, it became this utopian nightmare in certain provinces. And we realized that if we do buy trucks, we can go down to the United States and go for dinner and live like normal human beings. So that's what got me into trucking. And so that became kind of it was initially a side hustle. And then it turned out to get me front and center on the global media. So the short version of what happened in Canada, we have these very draconian mandates that you guys didn't have anywhere close to how bad it was in certain parts of Canada. And there's all these debates about, people's vaccine status. I'm vaccinated, by the way. Half the people in the convoy weren't. Half the people were. I don't care. Nobody cared. It was about the restoration of our freedoms and trying to have this movement of the revival of Canada. And based on the values of peace, love, unity, and freedom. Those are the 4 pillars. We didn't want it to be divisive. We didn't want to get pulled into these political echo chambers. We want as many people as possible to be on board. So in the beginning of January, my friend Tamara Leach, who was the one who was arrested and jailed for 49 days total, she called me on January 15th and said, yeah, we set up a GoFundMe, and we're doing a convoy, because they had done one a few years prior, that was disrupted by the political parties. And I said, okay. She said, we've already got, I think it was $100,000 or something in the GoFundMe, which was 5 times what they even wanted to get. She said, it's getting a lot of attention. I need somebody to help with messaging. She knew I do podcasts. I know alternative media. And I have media training from previous careers. So I said, yeah, sure. It's would be my pleasure to be a part of it. And I believe in this because we're all fed up with having to put on these face diapers everywhere we go. And we were off to the races. And boy, did things accelerate really quickly. It really got a little nuts. We had some of the most beautiful moments in the history of our country, of thousands of people in rural communities just lining up on all the overpasses with flags and love, and we love you truckers, and kids making signs, thank you truckers. All these videos, like everybody came together, and they're driving, 5,000-6,000 kilometers starting from Vancouver across the entire, most of the continent to get to Ottawa. And the length of that journey just brought people together. And these are people that were essentially, especially in the case of Quebec, they were locked in their home for 2 years. And, when we talk about these sorts of issues to the Bitcoin community, I mean, you guys get it. Because I think we all have this underlying core value that's common amongst each other, which is freedom. Freedom is number one. That is the most important. Without freedom, you got nothing. So we saw the entire country come together, and when I started to develop the media strategy, I thought, being in alternative media, understanding how it works, this is our opportunity, and I think this is my opportunity, to teach the fake news a lesson and to show them who's in control. They're not in control. We're in control. So I went out of my way I utilized various social media platforms, various accounts. I took over Tamara's account. She gave it to me because she doesn't really know what to do with it. And I think one of the earlier things I did was we have in Canada CBC, that is our state broadcaster, and the Toronto Star, which is like the New York Times. And I banned them from all our press conferences from the very beginning. Okay, note to media, you're all banned. Don't even bother coming. They got so angry. Yes, it was amazing. And they took the bait and they started to talk more about it. And we knew they're going to call us names no matter what we did, right? There's no point trying to negotiate with them or interact with them, because they're just going to use the opportunity to target and smear this. Because we're working class people and middle class people. You have a whole range in trucking. You have the guys who are working for companies who are kind of new to the business, who are younger, and then you have the owner-operators who are small business owners, right? So you have a whole range of people. So after a couple of, I was working on it for about 3 weeks, and after those 3 weeks, finally the convoy was arriving in Ottawa. And you have to know a little bit about Canadian culture, but I think you'll understand this anyways. When I arrived there, which was the day before the trucks officially arrived, but because the convoy, the length of it was at least 70 miles long, and in some estimations they said it was 100 miles long of trucks. And that's not trucks with trailers. That's trucks that are bobtails, like just just the truck itself, and pickup trucks and all that sort of stuff. So it was between 70 and 100 miles long, longest convoy ever in human history. And boy, what a traffic jam that caused. It was, and then the convoys had a divide, and then there was another convoy. Oh, there's 2 more convoys coming from Nova Scotia. Oh, and now there's another 2 convoys coming from Quebec. Like the entire trucking industry in Canada decided, hey, let's go party in Ottawa. And when I arrived there the day before it officially started, or people officially got in, this city was already basically shut down. In front of the Prime Minister's office, we call him Prime Minister Blackface because he has an affinity for shoe polish. In front of Prime Minister Blackface's office, which is right across the street from the Parliament building, was a logging truck full of logs on it with a big slogan that became the unifying slogan, which was F Trudeau on it. It was absolutely hysterical. But what was most amazing to me as a Canadian, and I think you guys will understand this, in all countries there's different cultural angsts in different parts of the, people from California are going to be very different from people in, Mississippi, right? They're just culturally different, or Texas, for example. And there's always a little bit of friction, and friction sometimes is good, but friction sometimes goes a little too far. And in Canada, in Quebec, we've had referendums because they wanted to separate, to become their own country. That was always the baggage in Canada. But when I first arrived there, one of the very first things I saw behind the Chateau Laurier hotel was a line of thousands of people walking into Ontario, because that's the border between Quebec and Ontario. What the government had done is they actually already shut down the bridges for trucks and vehicles to get into Ottawa. So the people said, fine, screw it. I'm just going to park my car here, get out and walk. And this was thousands of people who were under the strictest lockdowns in the Western Hemisphere. They couldn't leave their house. And they came into Ontario, no masks, no restrictions. They had both Canadian flags and Quebec flags. They had signs that said freedom and liberté. And they came up to the Parliament Hill. And what did they do? They found their Canadian brethren from Western Canada which normally we were always taught we're always at odds with each other. And they came up and they hugged each other and they met each other. They shook each other's hands. And there was like an instant bond. It was just a chilling experience. It was absolutely amazing. There's no words to describe it. And I've told this story in a number of interviews I've done. We were in a Tim Hortons, and we're in line. Canada, Tim Hortons, Wally's. So we're in line, and there's two truckers ahead of us. Clearly, they are friends or had become friends. They're joking and pointing and laughing, and just having a good time. And but what was interesting is they were talking through Google Translate, because one spoke French, one spoke English, and they had no idea how to talk to each other. But they formed a friendship, and found out later on their trucks were basically next to each other. They became friends, and so many of those friendships are now strong today, despite everything that went on. In Brantford, there's a group of 150 people that have a monthly barbecue together. I know of 2 convoy babies that have already been born, because you're in a protest, you got a big cab in the back, you got to warm up a little bit. What are you going to do? Yeah. So it was absolutely amazing throughout the entire experience. There was one of the problems that we dealt with, and that's what's occurring in the commission is coming to light, is there were many political parties, many independent groups that were on the ground trying to sabotage us. I don't talk much about that in the book, but I do mention it just briefly. And political parties as well. And, we're just a group of truckers coming together, and the whole world is looking at us. And you talk about pressure. It was insane, because you had all these political actors trying to agitate people, trying to cause violence. There was a guy who came with a Confederate flag. And it's like, that's a different country. Like somebody's got to tell the people in Trudeau's office that there's a line, on the map, right? So he came through with his Confederate flag with a truck imprinted on the Confederate flag. It's like, all right, now we know law enforcement is trying way too hard. Those were the feds, totally, right? And, he's wearing a black balaclava. So I said, oh, it's Justin Trudeau. He's always got black on his face. That's got to be who it is. And what happened, what was the reaction from all the truckers, is they said, get out of here. That's not what this is about. This is about peace and love. You're trying to disrupt this. You're trying to cause division. That's not what we're here for. And he was ushered out, sort of thing. So we had a couple of episodes like that, like you would have with any sort of protest. And it was basically political actors trying to sabotage us. So we had the government trying to sabotage us, law enforcement trying to sabotage us, political parties trying to sabotage us. It was crazy. But with all of that, everybody kept their cool. And it was peaceful all the way through. You probably have seen the videos and the pictures of the guys in the hot tub. I love it. The hot tub and brewskis on Wellington right in front of the Parliament building when it was minus 30 degrees. It was. It doesn't get more Canadian than that. It was totally Bob and Doug McKenzie, right? Then the Sikh community, there's a lot of Sikh people in trucking. They came up and said, guess what? We're not white supremacists. Now we're going to cook you some food and hang out with you people. And they were so good because some of them owned some restaurant. So they not only were cooking food on the barbecue for people, but they were packaging the food. Like you were going to a restaurant just like behind somebody's truck. It was amazing. Then they set up a soup kitchen for the homeless and started getting food to the homeless people every day. Crime plummeted by like 90% because the truckers were there, keep an eye on the city, shoveling the snow. And how did the government respond to it? Well, they brought in martial law. They didn't talk to us. They didn't even reach out to us, nothing. They had some political actors trying to sabotage us, and when that didn't work, they just brought in the full brute force of the country. And then we get on to the most scary part, which was having our accounts seized or blocked. So on the 18th, when the police got violent, we had road captains across the entire country. That they all came into my room. Tamara had been arrested. Chris Barber had been arrested. So they naturally came to me next. They told me the story of the previous night. A trucker was in his cab. and the police started banging on his doors, which they had been doing all through the 3 weeks. It was a little bit of intimidation tactic. But this time they kept banging, and then they smashed the windows of the doors of the truck, opened up the doors, pulled guns on him, and dragged him out of his cab because he was just sitting in the back of the bed. They were taught when they bang on the door, just go to the back of the cab and just hide back there. Well, they went in, they grabbed him, threw him out in the snow, like it was a fresh, Christmas sort of snowfall. They threw him on the snow and arrested him and took him in for processing. So the next morning, that's when the road captains came into me and they said, the cops are getting violent and they've been staging everything and somebody had been helping them, jockey trucks around so it'd be easier to kettle them. I said, if you want to leave, I'll support whatever you want to do. If you want to leave, I'll put the message out that it's time to leave. And they all said, yeah, it's time to leave. Let's get out of here. And because we didn't want people to get hurt. We obviously won at that point. The government's gone so desperate that they've had to turn violent. We've won. And all the mandates that we were trying to fight against on the provincial level, they were all dropped. Not immediately. Some of them were immediately, but the rest of them within a week, couple of weeks sort of thing, they all dropped them with one exception. The federal government held on to them till, I believe, about 4 weeks ago. And when they were all dropping them, I kept, trolling them online, hashtag nothing to do with truckers, right? Because they got to do it and save face. And we knew what it was about. And so I think we made the point that ultimately we were in charge. But back to the scary part was after the road captains decided we're going to leave, and they started calling them police liaison officers, I got a call from my then lawyer at the time, and he said, you have to leave. Why do I have to leave? I got a broken leg, a broken ankle in a wheelchair. He's like, well, the cops might arrest you. I'm like, then they're not going to come into the Sheraton and break down the doors and arrest me. They might. Don't be so dramatic. But he persisted and pushed me over and over again for about a half hour and convinced me that, everybody else is likely to get a gag order. Somebody's got to be able to speak freely and speak about freedom. And you haven't been arrested yet, so just get out of there. So I left the hotel, called a friend of mine. I went to stay with a friend in Ottawa for another few weeks. I called Uber. I didn't know if I could even get an Uber because they made a red zone around downtown Ottawa and put gates all over the downtown area. Like, it's like where what's that movie, Hurt Locker? Like that's what we're dealing with. It's crazy in Canada. And I called the Uber. The Uber came like an hour later because there was all these checkpoints in the city. And I got in the car, and, my crutches in the snow, so managed to jump into this little Corolla. And we started driving through the streets to get to my friend's house, which is in the suburbs of Ottawa. And I noticed the checkpoints, and it was like everything you would imagine. I have some good friends that were Iranian dissidents that have, political refugees to Canada. They would tell me about what the checkpoints were like in Iran. That's exactly what we had in Canada. Every block there was, 4 cops and a cruiser looking around, looking in cars, sort of just crazy to see that in a Western liberal democracy, just completely unacceptable. So I'd say it was Iran with minus 30-degree weather, basically. But I managed to get through. My name, I'm in the the Uber. The guy's listening to the radio, and my name is on the radio. I'm like, hey, why don't you change the channel? He's like, oh yeah, whatever. So I got to my friend's house, and I said to her, okay, I got to call my lawyer. I got to do a bunch of media stuff, but why don't I order us an early dinner, because it was mid-afternoon. Let's get an early dinner, a lunch, whatever you want to call it. I'll get you Uber Eats. The least I can do for you, bringing me in and stuff like that. And I went to process Uber Eats, and then what I get? Declined. Like, what's it declined? Yeah, I have well more than enough credit. Again and again, did it. I'm like, uh-oh. They were talking about tools, right? The tools that Krista Friedland, Krista, my grandfather was an actual Nazi. Friedland is what we call her. the tools that she brought in. So I pulled up my laptop, and I went to log on to first my corporate bank account, and you could see there was a balance there, but all my transaction history had been wiped out. And it said, when you begin to bank with us, your transactions will appear here. And I've tried to explain the emotional state of that. It's really, until you go through it, to understand that you have a multi-sig wallet with all of your money that's in a bank account. That's what that is. And it really hit me at that moment. And then I went to my other bank account, Scotiabank, which was the article that was written about me in Zero Hedge and Daily Wire when they eventually apologized. Scotiabank, it's like I'd never been a customer. So I entered all my IDs, my client card ID, and it said, yeah, no such user exists. Just crazy. So here I am, my leg up like this, because I got a cast and whatever. I can't buy any medicine. I can't buy any food, because the government decided it's time to starve me. And they did it to a whole bunch of us. The number has been all over the place. I've heard up to 300 people, and I've heard as low as 75 people. Who knows what the number is? And that's what they were discussing in the commission today. And the government is now trying to say that it's the banks. They did it on their own. The banks did it, right? Because that's what banks like to do, right? And the banks would just have all the information and the list of names that the government doesn't like, right? That's why, if those of you who follow my Twitter, you'll say, nope, here's the Zero Hedge article. Because what I did, once they froze my accounts, I sent an email to the president of all of my banks and CC'd as many lawyers who at that time I had like 7 lawyers now working on my case. And I CC'd all my lawyers and I said, why can't I get into my bank account? Just politely. And one of them finally responded, maybe about a week later. And they inferred that it was under the direction of the RCMP, our equivalent of FBI, or federal police. And I thought, I'm going to hold this. This is going to be important one day. And about 2 or 3 months later, we had a parliamentary commission discussing this very issue, and the government said, well, it wasn't the government, it was the banks. And that's what I was like, all right, let's do the article, send it out, and that's what got to Zero Hedge and Daily Wire and whatever. And there was a lot of oops in that parliamentary hearing when they realized the next day that article went viral. Because at the end of the day, we all care about our money. It doesn't matter where you are on our political spectrum. This is our monetary energy. This is the energy we put into our life and how we store our energy. And the government is playing with it and cutting us off. So I was lucky. I had about 8 days that I didn't have access to any of my money, and I in fact was trying to calm everybody else down. Why? Because I had Bitcoin. So I don't know if it was conscious or subconscious, but I always knew that I had a hot wallet and a cold wallet. I had emergency money in Bitcoin if I really needed it. If I was really desperate, I could do something with it. Whereas everybody else who didn't know Bitcoin was not in that same position. So the other thing I'm just going to drum back before, and I mentioned this with one of you I was talking to before, bringing Bitcoin up to a bunch of truckers. So I was in the room because once I broke my leg, I was pounding out interviews, as many as possible, trying to fuel as many clicks and getting as much attention around the world as possible. I was going for 100 million views the first week, and I got pretty close to that. I got this message over Twitter from typical Bitcoin account, right? Like, looks like an anime character. It's got a weird name, don't know who it is. BTC is in the description. And it was a guy using the handle, Nobody's Caribou. And he says, hey, we're trying to help you guys raise money with Bitcoin. Are you a real Bitcoiner? I'm like, I know it's a fake Bitcoiner, but I'm a Bitcoiner. Like, I'm pretty quiet about it, but yeah, I am. And the reason I was quiet about it, by the way, is because I ran for Parliament in 2015, And last time I will ever run in an election. It's the worst thing ever. Don't do it, please. But at that time, this is how much things have changed. It was, it's only for criminals. And so I had Bitcoin. I had to keep it quiet, right? So I just got into that habit of just keeping it to myself and just, stacking sats for the future is kind of was always my philosophy. And if people ever asked me, then I could tell them and whatever. But now here I'm the center of, me, Tamara, and the rest of them, the center of this global event. Every news agency in the world is trying to get me on the phone or to respond to their emails. But, hey, this guy's talking about Bitcoin. Let me talk to him. And he said, yeah, we're going to, he said, do you mind if I come meet you? And I said, yeah, sure. So he showed up with 12, 13 other Bitcoiners that were on the ground there, who he had just met on the way coming to my place. He put something out that, yeah, I'm going to go meet BJ. If anybody's in Ottawa, come hang out. And they all just kind of picked each other up on the street, and then they show up in one big room together. And they realized, what do they say? My blood bleeds orange. That I understand why it's so important. And so they were great. They're on board with it. They said, we're going to go try to raise much money for you guys as possible. They were setting up a nunchuck multi-sig wallet, which was so amazing when the Ontario government sought the injunction to block all the Give, Send, Go money, which was a conservative government, by the way. So this is not conservative versus liberal, left versus right. They were all complicit in this together. Yep. Okay. So they Nunchuck released their statement, and I remember the wording was something like, "We do not have access to our clients' funds. That is by design." So sorry. And then I saw Ted Cruz, of all people, is reading the Nunchuck statement at CPAC at their conference that year. So no, that year is within a week or two. It was absolutely amazing. But then I went to our board, and we had 7 people that tried to form a board because we raised a total of $23 million in 3 weeks. And that's what scared all the political parties. That's why this is all political. They can't have a group of motivated working class people, well funded, with a large group of people they could reach out to. That becomes a political threat. That's why they were so aggressive with us. But so I went to the board and I said to them, and the treasurer, who I'm friends with, I explained to him, listen, we have some people. Really good people, I met them. They're raising Bitcoin for us to help with the fundraising because they're worried about funds getting frozen. And our treasurer, I think he had an aneurysm. I mean, his eye was popping out of his socket for sure. And then he just went like, that's for criminal activity. That's for crime. We can't, oh my God. So I had to do I had to do the speed dating equivalent of orange pilling. I had to orange pill as many people as quickly as possible, which was a challenge in itself. And you know how it is. We all know how it is. You tell people the first time, they kind of get it, but they're not sure. They lose interest. You tell them again, maybe a little. You got it over and over. I had to do that in a short period of time. But anyways, it ended up me saying to Caribou and the rest of them, don't worry about that. Just go raise the money and let's get some money to some truckers. Go ahead and do it. And whatever other problems we knew. We knew there was going to be legal problems. We had the suspicion there would be legal problems about Bitcoin at some point, so we wanted to make sure that there was a small percentage for there, just in case we needed it. But let's get some money to the truckers. So the conclusion of all of it, and some of you have seen the videos online, we did manage to get, all the money was frozen. Nothing got to the truckers minus some people distributing cash, except for Bitcoin. And we managed to get, it was approximately 14 Bitcoin, if I remember correctly, was distributed to the truckers that were there the longest. The truckers that were there for the whole 3 weeks, stuck it through to the end. And in a couple of cases, it was a very, very emotional reception. You also saw the one where Caribou, the guy was live streaming. He's like, get out of here. This is great. And that guy had just a really great positive attitude. But we had a lot of truckers there that were from Eastern Europe. A lot of them. There were a lot of Eastern European truckers there. And part of the reason they were so motivated, as some of them told us, is because they've seen this sort of politics in Eastern Europe. Yep. And that's why they came to the Western world, to get away from that. And it's following them there. Yeah. And that's why they were so emboldened. And a couple of them were just very close, at least in their minds, to losing their truck, not being able to pay their mortgage. They were really rapidly descending into financial dire straits. And I know what a trucker makes, whether it's an open owner-operator or a commercial trucker. And I know how much money was costing them to be there every day. And it was a significant cost to them. And a couple of them just broke down in tears and said, "You've saved my life. My wife was yelling at, we don't have money for the mortgage. We're 2 months behind now. This is all I needed. Thank you." Tears and hugs. And a lot of that, and one of them said, "I don't know what Bitcoin is, but it saved my life." But I'm going to learn. And those were some of the touching moments that's like the mood and the tone that I wanted this book to be, all the positive stories. We don't get into a lot of the detail on, by the way, for those of you who are technical and want to talk about, are we going to do multi-sig, single sig, or get into really technical stuff? That's not what this is for. What this is for is a beautiful, positive story that will give context to supporters of the Freedom Convoy, but also will reach people on the other side who didn't understand it, and they'll walk away understanding it was a movement about peace that was built on peace and love and freedom and unity with their fellow man. And in the last few chapters, I snuck in a couple of chapters about Bitcoin. Because why not? Because that's how, I like to do the soft orange pill. I do the boomer orange pill. I orange pilled my parents. I go on a radio program in Toronto. I'm friends with a very seasoned journalist. And we were going on for a couple of months just talking about Bitcoin because I orange pilled him. And he's a financial guy. And after a couple of months, he's starting to get people sending him emails saying, hey, have that Bitcoin guy back on again. I don't understand it, but it sounds interesting. That's how I do it. I do the very soft, slow approach. And when people are ready, then they'll start asking. And this is the soft, slow approach, telling an amazing story that everybody is going to love and support. And mixed in there towards the end is how Bitcoin gave people true freedom when their government became truly authoritarian and dangerous. And I think you're going to love it. So honkingforfreedom.com if you want to get a copy. And I'll take any questions you have. And thank you.
So how did you actually get the Bitcoin to the truckers? What was were you going wallet to wallet? What were you doing?
Okay, so Caribou it was really interesting because there was a lot of friction going on because people didn't know what was happening, and we learned something, which I explained before, and I'll get back to that in a second. He was trying to figure out what to do, and somebody online got really vicious with him. He had, because you know how Bitcoiners are. Everybody's got an opinion.
JW.
That's his name, right? Yeah. So JW got very aggressive and started, "I'm going to sue you, and you're stealing the money, and blah, blah, blah." And Caribou just said to him, "Hey, man," he sent him a private message, or called him or a private message, I can't remember. And he said, "Hey, man, do you want to just help me? You can come on board and do it with me." And to JW's credit, he said, "Oh, yeah, I can help you." Yeah, now I know there was, again, 100 Bitcoiners, you get 200 different opinions, right? So I know, I wasn't involved in that. Caribou was dealing with that, trying to find some sort of consensus that everybody could understand the process, but everybody wanted full transparency.
So what did you guys learn?
We learned about transparency, that I call it the obsession with transparency. when you're that obsessed with transparency, all you're doing is telling the government exactly what you're doing.
Right.
And we really need, in my opinion, we need to really focus on privacy in Bitcoin moving forward. That needs to become a paramount concern for all of us, and not just because of the convoy itself, but we didn't know. Listen, nobody knew. This was the first opportunity for Bitcoin in a Western country to deal with this issue, and it came through in shining colors. It was absolutely beautiful. So anyways, from what I know, what they did is they moved everything from the multi-sig wallet, which it was a 3 of 5. That was the nunchuck wallet. And they moved it into, I guess, a secondary wallet, and then they started making paper wallets. So what they did is they made a template of instructions. Nick had already been, Caribou had already been going around to all the trucks and just talking to them gently. And so, yeah, Bitcoin, I'll show you some sats, this is what it is. And then he showed up with an envelope that had instructions in it. It had a paper wallet in it and a couple other things in there. And said, here you go. Thank you for trying to save our country. Just scan it, install a wallet on your phone, and away you go. So it was amazing. I think what I would have done a little bit more, and I mean, time. We didn't have a lot of time. It was chaos. Like, it was really minute to minute. Things were fluid. But I think it would have been also advantageous to, once they get the Bitcoin, what do they do? Because a bunch of them, from what I understand, went to Coinbase, which, of course, that's what a new Bitcoiner is always going to do, right?
But what else could you do? Right?
That's the thing. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
ATM, right? Like,
yeah.
Go to a local network.
You do the best you can, and my hat goes off to those guys, because one of my motivations behind doing this book, because I am not a writer. But I don't know if Elon Musk and Scott Adams are right. It's a simulation. I have been spending for the past 4 years approximately, when I'm in Toronto every Saturday morning, going for coffee with a friend of mine by the name of John Goddard, who was an investigative journalist for 30 years for the many newspapers in Canada, and a published author. And we just kind of hung out, became friends. A friend of ours who's quite famous introduced us many years ago. And went through this experience. I thought, I got to write a book. If only I had like an investigative journalist who's a published author who could teach me how to write a book. I'm like, wait, So, and the reason I bring that up is, being an investigative journalist, those skill sets to go through and build the timeline and cross-reference all the media appearances and do interviews with, like, I'm not in every chapter in this book. We tell other people's stories in this book to make one fluid story from the beginning until the end. So I wasn't driving in a truck in Alberta, so we had to reach out to those people and get their perspectives. There was a guy, Dave Live from the Shed. Dave was broadcasting from a shed on top of a flatbread truck in front of the Parliament building. And he was raided when the cops came with full automatic rifles, like prohibited guns, in military gear. And nobody believed him except for one publication, the New York Times. What? But so we had to tell that story. So that story is in there as well. And the orange pill aspect of this, the reason I wanted to do both the Bitcoin part of it and the story itself, I knew this commission that's going on right now would be entirely politicized. It's because I know so many people in the parties, how it all works. And the conclusion of the report's going to be, truckers bad, government bad, don't do it again. These are the recommendations for amendments to the regulation. That's just how government works. Okay, fine. But I wanted to have as accurate an archive and story of exactly what happened that's completely true. So the reason John did interviews is he first did interviews with me before we even wrote a word. And then I wanted him to corroborate my interviews just to make sure I didn't misremember something or whatever. So we made sure it was hyper accurate. But also, I'm hoping that this will be, you have those moments in life, in history, where something happens, and when you're in the moment, it seems like no big deal. But 20 years later, that was the pivotal moment. And I'm hoping this will have been the pivotal moment of Bitcoin that we can use to teach people all over the world about the importance of self-custody, right, as we learned this week, unless somebody wants to buy some FTT tokens. But the importance of self-sovereignty, and most importantly, what I'm going to try to work on politically over the years, because I just have a lot of friends in politics, is the separation of money and state. And that's where we need to go. So I hope that answers the question.
Perfect.
Next question.
I wanted to ask, what about the people, I heard that there were people that had their exchange-based accounts frozen if they were donating, and do you know what happened to them, and did they freeze anyone's accounts in the US or cross-border?
Yeah, I got a notice from Kraken, I think. I don't know if I had any, look, I'm gonna admit, we all go down the clown coin rabbit hole when we get into Bitcoin. It's a part of the discovery process. Everybody does it. We all become maxis, but we all screw around at some point, and I did for a few months as well. So I don't think I had anything on Kraken, but I got a notice from them saying your stuff is frozen pending a Mariva injunction, because one of the other things that's happened is we have a $450 million class action suit against us. And that is brought into us, $450 million, by the residents, quote, the residents, people who work for the Liberal Party, by the way, because of the honking. Because we honked for 2 days. It was 2 days of honking. The rest of it was quiet. But because the honking wasn't enforced, last I checked, police enforce honking, not truckers. But anyways, it's just lawfare. It's just lawfare and harassment. And but something else that's come up, and I'm telling you, man, the separation of money and state, I couldn't believe what was happening. So we have some proceedings going on around, there was $6 million that managed to get through, and it was locked in escrow. So all that money is locked in escrow, and we're trying to get access to it to defend ourselves in this class action suit. So what did the Crown decide to put forward this week? If the money, some of the money, it's divided into different piles. There's one pile that's $3.4 million that's sitting in an account in escrow. That if that money gets released, the government wants to seek civil forfeiture. Because we want to defend ourselves in court. That's how crazy things are becoming. This is why what Bitcoin is so important. And I got to tell you, I don't wish this on my worst enemy, what I went through in having all my assets frozen. It's worse than canceling. I couldn't buy a cup of coffee if I wanted. It's just crazy. I had Bitcoin, but nobody else could, and it really freaked people out. It's the equivalent. Me and Jordan Peterson talked quite a lot during the protests, and we talked quite a few times since then, which is why he did the endorsement of the book, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But it's the equivalent of, we used to learn in school what it was like during the Middle Ages when you were banished from the town square, and you're banished from the city walls, and you're sent out to the forest, and you'd be dead within 2 weeks because you'd have no water, no food. This is the modern day digital equivalent of that, by locking people out of their assets. You want to talk about the next human rights issue, that's got to be the next human rights issue. And that, again, that is not one side or the other side of the political spectrum. That's for all of us. So, and Bitcoin is the solution for that, in my opinion. Yeah. Go ahead.
I can imagine a situation like that. Emotions are running really high. There's provocateurs there, and obviously the police were taking very drastic measures for a peaceful protest. Can you speak to some of the tactics you used? Was it just report everything? Was it constantly reminding the truckers to keep a level head no matter what happened? I'd love to kind of hear some of the lessons learned from that.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I learned in all of this, And this is going to sound really cheesy and corny, so don't laugh, but the power of messaging around the word love. Wow, does that really bring people together? And when I tried to figure out a messaging strategy and how to message in a simple way. What is our goals? Our goals were mandates and to end the ArriveCan app, the data tracking app. And how do we get people out of a state of anxiety and into a state of positivity? That is very important. Because listen, truckers are tough guys, right? They're most of them aren't like me. I've come from the corporate world into trucking, but a lot of these guys, they're good, solid people, salt of the earth people, and they don't take shit. They really don't. So I knew it was very important. I was explaining this to Jordan. I think the first conversation we had in the first week, I said, my goal is to make sure everybody is in that pod. And the framework that I had, and just so when people call me right wing, I went back to when I was a teenager and I used to go to Grateful Dead concerts, right? Or a Fish concert, or the Allman Brothers. Like, what was it? You're in a camp, everybody's hanging out, a little too much drugs for me, but whatever. And everybody loves each other. You'd have a hedge fund manager and an artist and a school teacher and somebody who just tours with the Dead, just all hanging out. And that was the vibe I was going with the Freedom Convoy. So that's why the messaging was very intent in that way. And it worked. It brought, there were people, I remember that first day that I was walking around, I saw it looked like these two girls from a Grateful Dead concert in tie-dye with a big peace sign and stuff like that. I'm like, it's exactly what I wanted it to be. So you saw all sorts of people from across the spectrum, like all of this division that we hear about, it's all BS. It's like I said in many of these interviews that I realized when I saw all these people from Quebec who couldn't speak English talking to all these hardened northern Albertan truckers who couldn't speak French, hugging each other and joking around and cooking for each other and stuff, that when the politicians and the media get out of the way, we all learn to love each other and come together. It sounds cheesy, but man, I learned the power of that, of finding that frame and communicating to people. And that's what we got to do, the Bitcoin community. If I'm going to, not to criticize the Bitcoin community, because some of us get very upset, as we know, but when people get into the altcoins, clown coins, shit coins, whatever you want to call them, let them do it. You listen. I always say it's a casino. Like, I get them coming into my spaces often in Twitter, and I try to do the soft approach, and I do listen. These people are new. They don't even know what Bitcoin is. Don't confuse them. Let them first learn Bitcoin, get proficient in Bitcoin. If they then want to go to the Luxor casino and start buying FTT tokens with some of their money, then they'll learn the way the rest of us learn. And I don't regret the fact that I went down the rabbit hole for a few months and learning about DeFi and how it all works, because I understand it all. And I understand why I'll never buy any more of it, right? It's just, but it's the learning experience. So I would like us we're not a community. We're people from all over the world that coalesce around this idea of freedom. But I think we can really soften our approach to people, especially when they're new. If they're new and they see conflict from the very beginning, that just turns them off. We need to be open and welcoming to people. I do this with this guy who I met while I was doing spaces at the end of the convoy. He's from this area, by the way, I shouldn't say that. But he used the moniker DJ Satoshi. And he's always trying to, bring new people in. I've brought so many people because of the convoy that they didn't know anything about Bitcoin. They didn't really care. They saw what happened. They were following me. They would come into a space with me and DJ. And there's like a whole long list of them now, all different age demographics, different career paths, completely different types of people, but they're all, like, I always think of Risa because she's the first one that I knew, that I met personally, that came to a Bitcoin conference just like this, where Foss was swearing at the Fed and yelling at people. I love that guy, he's amazing. And now she's like a miner, and she's got like a node, and like she's an expert. She's basically a developer. And back in March, she didn't even know what Bitcoin was. And this is not somebody who had any interest in finance and the financial system. Like I was explaining to somebody earlier today, when I was 17, I used to watch a lot of documentaries when I was a kid. And I watched, Bill Still had this documentary called The Money Changers. And it was all about the history of money. And not just the history of money, but the 3 different federal banks in the United States, why we had them, why they were ended, when the debt was finally paid off at one point, and all that sort of stuff. So I already had an understanding, and then my brother runs a very large pension fund in Canada. So I'm not really new to the space from the finance end of things, but we all then end up going down that rabbit hole. So now she's like, screw the Fed is evil, and whatever. Like it's amazing to see that we all end up coming to the same conclusions, even though we may come from completely different world backgrounds and have different life experiences. So it's been amazing. So I think as the Bitcoin community, I think we should encourage people to take the open and soft approach and the professional approach, if you will. And if people want to come in, I want to try this coin, it's like, okay, great. That's not what Bitcoin is, just so you know. That's a casino. People play casinos all the time, but not to like admonish people and target them and all the really aggressive behavior, because that just reflects negatively on all of us. And I've had a lot more success with people in taking this soft and open and loving approach with them, trying to bring them into the space. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to beat a dead horse about it because I know you touched on it already.
Yeah.
But I actually think the topic of
You look like a developer.
no, I'm not. I'm not.
Just kidding.
But I try to follow the technical stuff as much as I
okay.
can, and I apologize because I think I interrupted you on this, but I actually think that point of friction that you were talking about, where we had millions of dollars that we wanted to get to these people, and just getting it to them became the point of friction amongst a bunch of people who focus on how do we use this technology. I'm just wondering, do you know of anybody that's continuously working on that? Have we gotten anywhere? Is that what happens the next time this happens and there's a huge protest and we need to get $100 million to 100,000 people? What do we do? And I don't have an answer.
Jack Mahler.
And I'm not saying that you do either. And I don't know if Jack does.
There's a story that we tell in the book. Jeff Booth actually brought it up to me when we were on a phone call about, as a consequence of the Freedom Convoy, a whole bunch of things have happened. And the one that he brought up was there were people in the Ukraine that were watching what happened with the Freedom Convoy. And by the way, I'm not taking a side on Ukraine, Russia. Please, I don't take sides. So people yell at me. But they saw what was going on, and they needed to get bulletproof vests and stuff, whatever it was. They need to get some tactical gear or whatever. And they used Bitcoin to do it. And they raised money. I don't remember how much money it was, but within a week, because they went to the Bitcoin protocol, they got it within a week. The other thing is the Dutch farmers.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson was explaining to me, we were having a phone call last month. He said when he first spoke to them, he said the first thing they said was, we saw what went on with Canada and the Freedom Convoy. We saw how it ended, and we put in as many fail-safes as we could to ensure that we wouldn't suffer the same plight that what happened to the Canadian truckers. And it's been working for them. So you're right, and with each evolution of this process, with each protest, with each political event, we're all going to get a little bit better. I've gotten to know DJ Booth, the guy who created Tallycoin. Great dude.
Yeah.
Awesome stand-up dude. So he's been working on improving Tallycoin, right? So it's all these little things together. It's not like there's one big thing. Everybody's taking their corner and their piece of the Bitcoin space. and is improving upon it. And as long as we're openly communicating with each other, we'll see what's going on, and something great is going to materialize from it. But specifically how to address it all in, it's going to take many evolutions, I think, to come to a solid template and platform. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of pivoting off of that,
Yep.
a bit after the Freedom Convoy in Canada, there was some mutterings of truckers going to Washington, D.C. And that totally fizzled out. So, for different reasons. But I'm curious, do you think this could happen again the next time major liberties are threatened?
Anything can happen. That's Brian's protest. I know Brian. We both went on Hannity together, I think it was, and we spoke for about 20 minutes before. It's very different here. I said to Brian, the first thing is don't get involved with any politicians. We had a convoy in 2018. The conservative politicians came out. The leader and another politician came out. And they did the whole thing. Oh, we're here for you. We'll help you. We're going to give you a little bit of money. But don't talk to those people because they're racist. We don't like them. Whatever. And then it all fizzled out. With the convoy in the United States, as soon as I saw Ted Cruz in a truck, I knew it was over, right? And that's nothing against Ted Cruz. I like Ted Cruz. But once a political party gets involved, then they're going to use it for messaging purposes, and then your movement is done. So keep away from the politicians. In terms of, and the other thing is when they were contemplating going into Washington or not, they called me and they said, we're thinking about going to Washington. You did Ottawa. What do you think? And I'm like, I wouldn't do that. Said the United States, and I love this country. I spent a lot of time in this country. My parents are here for 6 months of every year. But it's a very different culture than Canada is. And I'm like, if you want F-35s taking you out in Washington, then sure, bring in a bunch of trucks. If it was the United States and I was doing it, I might go to, I don't know, Amazon depots, or I would go to different platforms that might be more effective in the private sector to send a message, right? But at the same time, you don't want to target private businesses. So you got to do it with kid gloves sort of thing. So it's got to be a completely different strategy for the United States. In Canada, what we have a problem in my province. If you remember the former crackhead mayor, his brother is now the premier or the governor of our province. And he's more left than Che Guevara. So he said he was right wing, but he's the complete opposite. And most of us are pretty much in the center. I think most of us think we're in the center anyway. So he's just been a huge disappointment. But one of the things he did is he invoked the Emergencies. Remember, I said conservative and liberal. He invoked the Emergencies Act 2 days before Justin Trudeau did on the provincial level. So again, with this whole, it's the right versus left, don't buy into that. We should all have friends on the opposite end of the spectrum. That's how we need to talk to each other. So he invoked it, and then they invoked it on the federal level as well. So what has he done since what happened in Ottawa is he's taken the Emergency Act measures, so martial law, and he's encoded them into permanent law in Ontario. So we are permanently in a state of emergency in my province. That's how ridiculous it's become. So separation of money and state, that is important.
How does Jordan Peterson still feel about Bitcoin? I saw the John Vallis and Breedlove podcast, and then didn't he walk it back a little bit?
You know what? I actually haven't spoken to him about Bitcoin at all. We had so many other things we had to deal with, and then we had a couple of conversations in last month. He was at his dad's house, so in his dad's like Archie Bunker chair, and hanging out for like an hour. And we were just talking about lots of other stuff. So I haven't broached Bitcoin with him too much. I will when I talk to him next. I'm going to ask him about that because I think it's important. He was at Bitcoin Miami. He was in the main room. I was speaking in the secondary room. But I don't know. I don't have an answer for you right now on that.
I sat with Breedlove last weekend, and he said that he doesn't get it.
No?
Yeah, he loves Peterson, but he said he doesn't get it.
Maybe he's still learning.
He's working on it.
Maybe he's
Yeah.
still learning.
Well, I mean, and in his defense too, I don't know if you have much more of a financial background than people like myself, but I understood, because I grew up with, I had a pet emulator when I was 3. So I've had a computer my whole life. I'm one of the few Gen Xers that have. And even though I understood technologically what Bitcoin was and how it works, there's that wall, at least there was for me, there's that wall you got to cross over that you absorb it philosophically, because we've never lived in a world where we have this type of asset. It plays with your mind to get your head around it. At least that's what I found. And I'm willing to bet he's in that same sort of space, that he still hasn't been able to philosophically understand the importance and how it plays into things. And I think that just comes with time. That took me a year and a half, even though I knew what blockchain was. I understand databases, like I understand things. Not a programmer, but I'm maybe one deviation below that, because my programming is, you'd all laugh hysterically. It's horrible. But I think that's what it is. But I'll try to work on it. And if you can connect me with Breedlove, I'd love to. Yeah. All right.
I can too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently is the different ways that we talk to different people when we're trying to introduce them to the technology. And I've gone back and forth, and I've kind of used different strategies with what I think would work best. You know, talking to people about the business case for it, you know, the investment, you know, philosophy behind Bitcoin, you know, 21 million and all that. And then there's the sovereignty aspect about the technology and about how it's unconfiscatable, considering that most of the people that you probably worked with leaned on the unconfiscatable angle. Is that more successful in terms of your experience about, you know, getting the message across, or is it more from the other angle, you know, financially? What do you think's the best angle?
Good question, and a very important question. It depends who you're talking to and where you are geographically. So I spent a lot of my life in Latin America. I was just there for a few months this year in Colombia again. It depends who your audience is, and it's all different reasons. So we're spoiled in the Western world because we haven't had to endure a currency collapse. So we're trying to sell people on the idea of an investment. That's what sells here. But you don't have to talk too long to somebody from Brazil or Argentina to say it's a store of value that the government can't play with. Right there, they're done. That's it. It's a very short pitch to Latinos, at least in my experience. The difficult ones are the people in the Western world, and that's why this book and the Freedom Convoy was so significant, because we saw some of these authoritarian characteristics show its face in our society. So now all of a sudden the freedom argument, you know, is always hyperbolic. Like we always, at least that's how I looked at it. Yeah, okay, government can't confiscate it, but that's never gonna happen. Come on. We're in the modern world. That's not, you know what I mean? But now all of a sudden, people are starting to really distrust their governments. So I think in the Western world, it's still primarily an investment. Obviously, for lots of people, works. I also, you know, I don't like the logical fallacies, but the appeal to authority of the fact that the investment sector, many of them are like Paul Tudor Jones recommends putting 5% of your portfolio in it. You just got to get people to bring it in. They don't even have to understand it, how it works, what blockchain is. They just understand it's freedom. The government can't touch it, and just put a little bit of your money into it. That's it. And once you do that, then they may or may not gain an interest. And I've met people that they've put a little bit in. They put in, you know, a percentage of their net worth, and they're like, okay, I have Bitcoin. It's in a cold wallet. What do I do with it now? I'm like, well, like all investments, what do? You're gonna wait. Okay, and then that's it, and then they just don't care. But then other people, you know, they'll start reading articles. They now have this new thing, so it just depends on the individual. And I'm an anti-collectivist person, and I try to look at each individual person differently and try to figure, okay, what's What are they looking for? What's the void that they need? And everybody has. That's why Bitcoin is so amazing, because it has something for everybody. I'm one of the few people, let's say, on this side of the political aisle, having run as a conservative. But I try as much as I can to have friends on the other side and interact with them. And for them, the example that really does it, and this is important, this is really important, is El Salvador. The fact that 70% of El Salvador was unbanked until, like, I tried to open a bank account in Latin America. It's a nightmare. It's impossible. And then instantly, like that, 100% of the country is unbanked. Their GDP exploded. It went up 9 or 10%, and crime started to implode. And 4.5 billion people in the world don't have a bank account. We can't live in a world like that now. We need everybody, rich or poor, needs to have the human right to transact. And when I explain that to people kind of on the other side, they get that, because they're well-intentioned. They want to help people, and they want to help people that they think are disadvantaged, and Bitcoin is an amazing tool for that.
Was there any KYC issues when you got, I know you had said that you had a 3 or 5 multi-sig and that you guys distributed it. Do you know of any KYC issues either from people donating or trying to donate and getting censored, or on the output where people were trying to take these funds, because it's all on a blockchain, so they know where the funds are. Was there any KYC issue you guys run?
I have no idea. So when we set up when they set up the Nunchuck wallet, it was over Zoom. I was dealing with so many problems, right? Like people running in and out of my room. Oh, this person said this. Somebody's having a news conference. It's unauthorized. Like those constant things. And I'm in the Zoom call trying to okay, so I don't know what they're doing. And they won't get upset at this. Nunchuck was new to them too. So they were struggling and having problems setting it up. That we had to set up 1 or 2 wallets. The first one didn't work. They had to do it again. It was a learning experience for all of us and we're trying to do it right in the here and now. There was no planning involved in it. In terms of people trying to convert their Bitcoin into fiat, I don't know. I'm a big privacy guy. That's one of the things, like I mentioned before with Bitcoin, I would really love to see us just get on top of the privacy thing and go as anonymous as we possibly can be. Especially when you have friends of mine, Iranian dissidents, that the slightest misstep in Iran, you get killed or you get kidnapped and killed. So those sorts of people have different pressures that we're spoiled. We don't have to deal with here. And so when people got their Bitcoin, I'm not going to search transactions and it's not my problem. It's not my business. That I want them to have the freedom and the privacy to do whatever they want with it, and all the best to them, sort of thing.
Any last questions? So I want enough time to get a last call and mix and mingle. But
last call?
Give a round.
They're all tired of hearing me.
Thank you, Benjamin. Just so many things resonated there. I just for 2 seconds, the concept of what we do with our time and how we turn that energy into money that we want to store for the future. Having someone play around with that, not having control of that yourself, and having to trust somebody that you think you should be able to trust, but then you can't trust them. I mean, that to me hits home. Freedom. Privacy is freedom. That hit home. Love, hope, fairness. These are the core values that I believe in and that I know that Bitcoin is all about. So I love everybody coming out, and let's keep doing this and let's just keep building it. That's what mass adoption is all about. And I think we're ahead of the game. I think we're early, but let's keep moving this thing forward. Thanks for coming out.